Living on a Bitcoin standard, please, let's give a warm welcome to Ben de Waal. Here you are. Thank you, Ben.
Good everyone? Yeah, it's on. Okay, cool. I didn't hear it. So yeah, I'm here to talk to you about living on a Bitcoin standard. And probably the first thing you're going to ask is, what? What does living on a Bitcoin standard mean? I'll get to that. But before I do, I kind of just want to tell you a little bit about myself to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. So I discovered Bitcoin in 2010, very early. I think, as best I remember, I think I mined 4 blocks, CPU mining, so I just hit the generate button on the user interface, as it was called back then. It mined some blocks, and then I thought, SETI at home is more interesting, looking for aliens using my CPU power. So I deleted the Bitcoin thing and kind of forgot about it for nearly a year. 2011, I rediscovered it, and at that point, it was an article on Slashdot or something, and people were using this strange Bitcoin thing to buy drugs on the internet. That's scary and evil. But I thought to myself, hold on, why is this thing not dead yet? Why hasn't anyone shut it down? Oh look, it's because they can't. There's something to this. There's something interesting here. So I dedicated myself to learning a lot more about Bitcoin, and since 2017 now, I've been living on a Bitcoin standard. So what does living on a Bitcoin standard mean? Well, we've got 3 main questions. What is living on a Bitcoin standard? Why do I live on a Bitcoin standard? What's the point in doing so? And then how? How do I actually go about doing it? So what does it mean? There we are. What does it mean to live on a Bitcoin standard? Basically, one very simple thing. Recognition that Bitcoin is money, and deciding that it is the money that I choose to use, potentially over any other or exclusively instead of any other. So what living on a Bitcoin standard is quite simply using Bitcoin as money. But obviously that raises some more questions. What is money? Money is a bunch of different things. The 3 most common things you'll hear that money is that money is a store of value, money is a medium of exchange, and money is a unit of account. So I briefly want to jump into that. I think probably a lot of you out in the audience have heard this 100 times, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if there's anything I say which piques your interest, feel free to catch me afterwards, and we can go into a bit more detail. So money is a store of value. So what is value? Well, value is things that you want. Value is subjective. You sometimes want some things more than others, more than at other times. For example, if you're really thirsty, you're in the middle of a desert and you're dying of thirst, a glass of water is really nice to have. You value it a lot. Whereas when you're sitting in your living room watching a movie, a glass of water might be, it's nice to have, but it's not exactly the same thing as when you're dying of thirst in a desert. So value is this subjective thing. It's also different between people. I might value a glass of water after being up here on stage than you do, just because I've been talking for 20 minutes. So it's not only a matter of being or definition of value. We then need to ask if it's a store of value subjectively, it's also intersubjectively a store of value. So intersubjective value means I value something a certain amount, you value it a certain amount, and maybe we want to come to some agreement about the value between us. And that's essentially the basis of all trade. That's how you trade things. I value something that I value something that you have, you value something that I have. Maybe we value it, I value your thing slightly more, you value my thing slightly more, so we're willing to swap. And that's pretty much how money works. That's what money is. So an intersubjective value system. All right? What does storing value mean? Well, here's where things actually get a little bit interesting, because value is more or less a type of measuring stick. We measure distance using things like centimeters and meters and kilometers, or if you're American, miles, but they're weird. We measure audio, so sounds, using decibels. We measure lots of different things. We've got these units of measurement, but you don't store centimeters. You don't store decibels. So how do you store monetary value? Well, what it really means to store monetary value is to store it across time. Time is the important thing. We want our measurement to be the same in the future, or perhaps even better, but generally at least the same in the future, that it is now. Imagine if you woke up tomorrow and a centimeter was suddenly half of what it used to be. All of a sudden, every place that you're going to is twice as far away in numerical terms. It's chaos, it's ridiculous. So when we're talking about storing value across time, we're essentially just saying we want the measurement unit to stay the same. Obviously, there's a problem with traditional fiat money in that regard. It doesn't stay the same. It even has built-in desired levels of inflation according to central banks, which is such a ridiculous concept, but they're essentially saying, let's make your centimeters shorter every year, and you're the one who's going to have to figure out how to measure distances now. It makes no sense. So instead, let's use a monetary system which doesn't do that. And obviously, that's Bitcoin. So, okay, that's store of value. Medium of exchange was the second thing I talked about for what money is. So medium of exchange quite simply means we're exchanging stuff. I'm giving you something, you're giving me something, and one of those things that we're giving is money. So medium of exchange essentially says that we accept that there is an intersubjective value, and we're willing to transfer it between parties. You can do that over distance. So I can transfer something a few centimeters by handing it to you, or I can transfer something halfway across the world. Different monetary systems have different properties that make this easier or harder. So, people talk about, let's again go with fiat money, let's use euro. If I wanted to hand somebody a 20 euro note, I can do that pretty easily if they're standing in front of me. If they're halfway around the world, I might need to put a 20 euro note in an envelope to send it to them in the postal system, and that's going to take some time. There's going to be a cost associated with it. Or I could use some kind of middleman. I could use a bank, for example, to do some kind of transfer, but now I'm trusting a bank, and they're probably charging me money as well, and they might say no, and they might surveil what I'm doing. So, it's not exactly great at money over distance. Other kinds of hard money, you look at gold, where people say gold's this good hard money. It's even worse at transfer over distance. Think about all of the Nazi gold that was confiscated after the Second World War, and people wanted to send it back to the countries where it should have belonged. The amount of money that was spent just sending gold around, and that's still the case today. People are sending huge amounts of gold from one place in the world to another place in the world, and it costs a fortune. So sending value over distance is really difficult. With Bitcoin, it's incredibly simple. So again, that's another place where Bitcoin is a better form of money. Obviously, medium of exchange also means over time. I want to be able to send money to the future. When my kids were born, I have two kids. Maybe some of you saw my daughter speaking earlier upstairs. If you didn't, I suggest you catch it online later. She's a much better public speaker than I am. She's 13. When my kids were born, I put a certain amount of Bitcoin, I'm not going to tell you how much, into a time lock, because Bitcoin enables that. That time lock expires in about 3.5 years from now. So there's a certain amount of Bitcoin which has been locked up for my kids for quite a while now. And I sent money into the future. Isn't that cool? Medium of exchange over time. Unit of account is the last property of money I want to talk about before I get into the why and the how. So a unit of account basically just means it's the way that you measure things. So if I go and buy a Coke or a beer or something over at the bar there, they're going to charge me a certain amount of money for it. And they're going to denominate that in euro because that's what they do here. Even if I pay in Bitcoin, the amount is denominated in euro. So the unit of account they're using is euro, and the medium of exchange, in my particular case when I'm paying there, will be Bitcoin. So you can actually use Bitcoin as your unit of account. I'm an independent consultant. I actually do have one large client at the moment who I spend most of my time working for, but I am an independent consultant. I'll have several clients at a time. And for most of my one-off clients, I actually write them invoices denominated directly in Bitcoin. So I will charge somebody, for example, for a particular job. It might be, let's say, 500,000 sats. So 500,000 satoshis. I don't care how many euro that's worth. That's what I'm charging. That's what I get paid. Unit of account, however, doesn't just has to be what you write on a bit of paper. It can also be how you think about it. I live in Germany. In Germany, the official currency is the euro. But I live very close to the Czech border. I also live not too far from the Polish border. In the Czech Republic, they've got Czech crowns. In Poland, they've got the Polish zloty. I work for companies all over the world. My main client at the moment is UK-based. I had a US-based company that I was working for a while. So in my daily life, people are denominating things in euro, Czech crowns, Polish zloty, UK pounds, and US dollars. None of that seems like a stable, sensible system to me. So I started thinking in terms of Bitcoin. I started thinking, how many Bitcoin is that worth? How many sats? And like right now, you could tell me something costs 20 euro, and I actually have to do a little bit of mental calculation to say, okay, how many sats is that? Because sats is my native unit of account. It's my mental unit of account. I'm not going to say everyone should be like that, but I think I am an example of an early adopter, and I think the world is going to move more in the direction. I think 10, 15 years from now, a lot of you will also be thinking in terms of sats, not in terms of whatever currency you happen to prefer at the moment. All right, so that's what living on a Bitcoin standard is. It's recognition of Bitcoin as money, and now we know what money is. So instead of talking about what, let's start talking about why. Why would I want to live on a Bitcoin standard at all? You know, what's the value of it? What's the point of living on a Bitcoin standard? Well, as already said, Bitcoin is a store of value, and it's generally preferable to plan for the future than not to do so. So I want to hold my money, any money that I save, any money that I don't spend, any money that I don't give out for goods and services in my daily life. I want the savings to be in Bitcoin. I think that's fairly straightforward, and I think that's something most people in this room probably already understand fairly well. But beyond that, Bitcoin is a medium of exchange. There are lots of different ways to do this, and I've heard the phrase spend and replace mentioned at least 4 or 5 times today by different people. Let's briefly investigate what spend and replace really means, because I might blow your mind here. Spend and replace means I hold some, let's just for the sake of argument say euro, and I hold some Bitcoin. And I find a place which accepts Bitcoin. So I walk in there, and I spend Bitcoin, and then I take some of that euro and I will go to an exchange or some other system and swap that euro that I have for Bitcoin so that I didn't actually end up losing any Bitcoin. Why did I do this? Why would somebody choose to do spend and replace? They do it because they think Bitcoin is more valuable to hold than euro, so they don't want to spend the Bitcoin really, and they'd rather get rid of the least valuable money first, get rid of the euro. But spending Bitcoin is good for the Bitcoin economy, so let's do that. Do you see a problem here? Bitcoin is more valuable to hold than euro. So why was I holding the euro to begin with? Why did I hold that euro until the point that I spent the Bitcoin if I knew I was just going to exchange it for Bitcoin anyway? Why didn't I exchange it beforehand? That's kind of an epiphany I had in 2019. Yeah, 2019, wow. No, 2017, sorry. 2017. And yeah, it's a common idea, but it's kind of got that problem. So about 10 years ago and, 3-4 days now, a guy named Laszlo bought some pizza. You've probably heard of him. He spent 10,000 Bitcoin on 2 large pizzas from Papa John's. Papa John's didn't actually accept Bitcoin. He just said on a forum, hey, I'd like some pizza. Is anyone willing to order some pizza for me, get it sent to my house, I'll send you 10,000 Bitcoin. It was the first time Bitcoin was used as currency. And it represents something really important. And so many people tell me, oh, he should have held on to that Bitcoin. The opportunity cost of spending 10,000 Bitcoin, what an incredible problem for him. He must regret it so much. How many of you at the time had enough money to buy 2 pizzas? Let's call it 40 euro. It was probably less at the time, maybe 30, but how many of you had 30 to 40 euro to buy a couple of pizzas? I would imagine most of you. Why didn't you buy 10,000 Bitcoin with it? Why didn't you exchange that money for 10,000 Bitcoin at the time? Because you didn't realize. But you suffered the exact same opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of spending Bitcoin is identical to the opportunity cost of holding fiat that you could have exchanged for Bitcoin but didn't. The moment I realized that, I stopped holding fiat. That was it. I said, I'm only holding Bitcoin from this point forward. At the time, I was still being paid in fiat, but I would receive my fiat paycheck and immediately I would sell that fiat for Bitcoin. Also notice the wording I'm using there. I don't say I buy Bitcoin, I sell fiat. Because I don't think in terms of the euro anymore, it's the foreign currency to me. I'm selling it for my preferred currency, Bitcoin. So, obviously, why live on a Bitcoin standard? Because it doesn't make sense not to. It's quite simply the most reasonable thing to do. If you are able to live on a Bitcoin standard, there is zero reason not to live on a Bitcoin standard. Okay, how? How do I live on a Bitcoin standard? Obviously, this is going to be different for everyone, and I can't say all of the different options that are out there because everyone's situation is unique. But I'm just going to mention a couple of things which are probably helpful in some ways. So the first is obviously spending directly. Find places that accept Bitcoin and spend Bitcoin with them. Easy as that. Here in Arnhem, it's amazing. There are so many places, like I only got here late last night, and I haven't had much of a chance to wander through the city yet, but just this morning, I was looking, where can I eat breakfast for Bitcoin in Arnhem? Actually, there's like 4 or 5 places I can eat breakfast. That's awesome. So, had a wonderful breakfast. My daughter paid directly out of the wallet on her phone. I'll pay her back. Just wanted to get a good photo of her spending some Bitcoin here in Arnhem. So, spending directly is a really good way. And I see Nathan sitting there in the audience, Nathan Day. I have to give a huge shout out to btcmap.org, Nathan's creation there. BTC Map is the best way to find places to spend Bitcoin directly. I use it constantly whenever I go to a new city, whenever I go somewhere new. I'm like, where can I spend Bitcoin directly here? I'll use BTC Map to find where I'm spending Bitcoin. That's just part of my standard life now. Beyond that, obviously, for spending directly, orange pill the world around you. Walk into places and say, I'd like to buy this. And they say, sure, that'll be this much money. And you say, okay, can I pay in Bitcoin? They say no. You make a decision at that point, do you pay with something else or do you just walk out? Honestly, walking out is a pretty powerful statement at that point. Works very well in high-end restaurants because high-end restaurants don't want to lose a single customer. One customer is worth a lot to a high-end restaurant. So you start walking out and they'll be like, hold on, just a minute. So you can pay in Bitcoin in a lot more places than you'd expect. You just got to ask. Beyond spending directly, there are some practical considerations. Not everywhere takes Bitcoin. I still haven't got a petrol station anywhere near my house where I can fuel up my car for Bitcoin. So there are these considerations that you have to make, and one of them is, okay, I'm on a Bitcoin standard, but I can still use fiat as a medium of exchange. It's practical, it's pragmatic. It's not my money, but it's money that somebody else wants. So I will often use some kind of just-in-time approach to exchanging Bitcoin for fiat, buying some fiat, just for the purpose of making a particular transaction. There are a few good peer-to-peer exchanges out there, which I would highly recommend over any of the centralized ones, but that's just a matter of personal taste. Different people may have different risk profiles they choose. So you can just exchange, buy a small amount of fiat when you need it, but obviously the goal is remove those things from your life as much as possible if you're wanting to really try to live on a Bitcoin standard as much as you can. There are some great services out there which can really help you do that. One of my favorites at the moment, I used to live in Australia a very long time ago, and for some reason I still have an Australian credit card, but it actually turned out to be a really, really useful thing because there's an Australian service called Living Room of Satoshi, which lets you pay any Australian bill using Bitcoin, including credit card bills. So if I really have to use a fiat exchange method, I can actually just buy something on my credit card and then pay it off immediately using Bitcoin. So yeah, that's very practical. Obviously that isn't for everyone. By the way, there's a similar Canadian service called Bills, I believe. I've never used it, but I've heard it's basically the same kind of thing for Canadians. There's a company called Bring In. They're going to be releasing a prepaid credit card that you can top up with Lightning payments in the relatively near future. So that's something to look out for. That seems like something that could be very interesting to use. Bitrefill, one of the sponsors of this event, this conference, they're amazing. I use them a lot. My daughter uses them a lot as well. You can buy, as I mentioned, we live in Germany. You can buy gift cards for one of the local supermarkets using Bitrefill. So if I want to go grocery shopping, obviously there are no supermarkets near me that accept Bitcoin, but I can go grocery shopping making use of Bitrefill. And last but not least, of course, peer-to-peer exchange services are worth pointing out. So if you need some fiat, then things like Peach, Hodl Hodl, Bisq, Vexel, there's a bunch of them out there. Peer-to-peer exchange services allow you to buy some fiat for those one-off cases. So that was kind of the very quick run-through of living on a Bitcoin standard. I think it's one of those things where over time there will be a lot more opportunities to do so. It will become a lot easier. I can even tell you, over the years that I've been doing it, so since 2017, it's changed drastically. Basically, right at the start, living on a Bitcoin standard for me basically meant holding Bitcoin and whenever I needed to buy anything at all, get my hands on some fiat. Now it means sometimes get my hands on some fiat, but a lot of the time now, I can go into a shop, I can use a Lightning transaction to buy something. I've even seen cases where I've orange-pilled two particular companies and I see a person from one company using a Lightning transaction at the other company. So I'm actually building little circular economies around me. And I think that's something everyone can do. And honestly, I do think it's something people should do if they are able to do so. If you have any questions, I would love to talk to you after the talk is over. Feel free to approach me or my daughter at any time, and I'd be happy to chat. Thank you very much for your time.
Nice talk. All right. Yes, if you still hold fiat, you are missing an opportunity.